Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of How You Getting F'd. I'm your host, Corgi Lumpur, and in today's episode, we'll be talking about employee rights again. Specifically, we're going to talk today about how you can become a new mother to a newborn baby and still get fired very easily on maternity leave in Singapore. So a month ago, I made a video on how easy it is for you to get laid off in Singapore, which you probably should check out if you haven't already. The link is down in the description below. The gist of that video is that you basically can get laid off for no reason whatsoever, and that's completely legal in Singapore, and all the employer has to do is give you your notice period as well as pay out that notice period, whatever given amount of time. Usually it's a month in Singapore, and that's it. You're done. You're out of the company. By the way, this video is not legal, financial, healthcare, medical, personal, therapeutical advice whatsoever. If you actually want to seek legal guidance, you should consult an attorney where you live. With that being said, I was recently at lunch with someone that I know, and she recently gave birth to a baby, and she was promptly let go from her job as part of mass layoffs that happened some couple of months after that while she was still on maternity leave. So what I did for this person was I actually knew another person who was also laid off, also in Singapore, also on maternity leave. So obviously I've never given birth in my life and do not ever plan to, nor have I been laid off on maternity leave. So what I did for this lady was I offered to connect her with this other lady that I knew who seemed to have gotten laid off under pretty much the same circumstances, and pretty much she got in touch, she got some helpful advice from that person. She managed to reach out to HR to negotiate a better severance. But what's interesting about talking with this lady is that she apparently found out that it's legal for you to get laid off on maternity leave as well in Singapore, as long as the employer pays you out for that period of time. So they can tell you that you are laid off while you are on maternity leave and have you just leave the company there and then, provided that they pay you out for your maternity leave and your notice period. That's what she told me, and that's what I'm wanting to share with you all, because like I said, I've never given birth before, I've never been on maternity leave, so I would never find out how it's like for someone, a woman who is on maternity leave having just given birth, how it would be like trying to get that person laid off. I know in European countries, it is impossible to get that person out of the company. Whether, the moment they find out that they are pregnant, they're going to tell the company, and from that day on, they're pretty much protected in most parts of Western Europe, except the UK. So it's very surprising to me, another culture shock, that you can apparently get laid off under all these circumstances that would get you sued and brought to court in other countries where they actually have employee rights. Oh, I also wanted to note that the lady in question was originally from China, and she says that it's even worse than China. Oof, that's gotta suck, because a lot of Singaporeans hate being compared to China and coming out at the bottom. So she says that in China, you can lay someone off after they've given birth to a child, but only after they've come back from maternity leave. You can't lay them off while they're still on their maternity leave. If someone's from China or has worked in China and knows how the law works, correct me if I'm wrong, right? So that's what I was told by this lady. You can't lay someone off while they are still on maternity leave, which makes sense because, first of all, getting laid off is a tough thing, right? Anyone, whether they're a man or a woman who gets laid off, especially for the first time, is not going to take it well. And even after a few times, speaking from experience, you still can not get used to it at times, right? So the first thing is, when you get laid off for the first time, it's gonna suck. It's like a train full of emotions that hits you right in the face. And on top of that, imagine having to deal with all that shit, getting laid off for the first time, right? And having to give birth and take care of a child also for the first time. That's gotta suck. And I imagine that's what the reason is behind why China enforces it that way. And there's many other countries that enforce it in different ways, but Singapore is probably the first country that I've ever heard of, especially a developed country, that allows people to just get fired like that, right? It's bad in the US, but people talk openly about how bad it is in the US. No one ever talks how bad it is in Southeast Asia. They just keep on not talking about it, and that's how things like this stay hidden, flying under the radar of everyone else, thinking that it's a civilized, nice place to live in, full of great smiling people, very welcoming, warm people, but the labor laws suck, right? They hate workers. So that's how fucking bad it is in Singapore. That's something that people don't talk about enough. And that's what I'm telling you on here, because there's not enough people who talk about it, and more people should, because the more people talk about it, the more awareness we have. The more awareness we have, the more pushback we'll get. The more pushback you'll get, the more likely something is to change. If you sit on your hands and shut the hell up and you never complain because you're so positive, that is the path where nothing gets done. Nothing will change, because your silence is basically compliance, and compliance is how those bullies get to push you over again and again and again and again and again. So that's it for today. I hope you learned something. See you all in the next video. Goodbye. And before we leave over here, I did see this video over here from NHK, which is a news broadcasting company in Japan. And they made a video about how Singapore is struggling with worker burnout. And I'll also link that video down in the description below. It's a 4-minute long video where they basically interviewed some guys in Singapore. One guy got laid off after having worked at the company for 8 years. And he worked so hard that he got burnt out and he couldn't perform because of his burnout. And they let him go, apparently. So watch that video. It's pretty interesting. And what's interesting as well is that there's a comments thread on the Singapore subreddit, and what's ironic over there is you have a bunch of people in the comment section on that subreddit where this post has been linked to, saying that in Japan they work their workers like donkeys and they work you to death like slaves, and they have no right pointing out that Singapore is worse because they are worse. And that's the problem with downward social comparison, which people in Southeast Asia, in particular Singapore and Malaysia, love to partake in. They love looking at other people whose lives suck so much worse than them and say, oh, well, I'm in a sucky situation, but will you look at those other people? They're so much worse. You should appreciate the fact that you're in this bad situation because it could be worse. It could be worse for you, bro. So just take it in the face. Just appreciate it and stop complaining about your life sucking, because it could suck even more, and that opens the doors to allowing even more suckiness to be introduced into your life, because instead of comparing and saying that you could be so much better than what you are at this stage, you're looking at other people who are worse than you and saying, we don't need to change anything. In fact, you should stop complaining because it's worse out there. There's always someone who's in a shittier situation. I used to hear that as a kid as well regarding financial status and poverty, where people in Malaysia would frequently say, oh, it's not so bad that people aren't earning a lot of money. Think of the people in Africa. Those people in Africa are starving to death. You're so lucky that you have a low-paying job in Malaysia that you shouldn't complain. Guess what? You should complain, because that's exactly how change is accomplished. If you never complain about it, nothing gets done. That's it for today, for real, and see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.